Hi Year 3, hope you're all okay. Welcome to today's reading lesson. For this you will need your copy of the Ice Palace, a pencil and a jotter. So if you want to pause this video now whilst you go and get everything that you need. Okay, fantastic. So before we start our lesson, I'd just like to do a little bit of feedback from last week's questions, so for those answers. So you were great at remembering our STEM sentences. So our STEM sentence was use the clues and what you know. So you were really great at that. You were also great at following the 4 steps to solve any question. Okay, so those were read it, zap it, scan it, and crack it. Okay, we're not quite there yet with the difference between the retrieval finder and the inference illuminator. Okay, I know in order to answer a question and to infer, you need to retrieve information from the text. They're the clues. Okay, but in order to infer, we need to draw a conclusion from what we have read that isn't actually there. So we're reading between the lines. So for example, for this question, number 3, it says, explain Ivan's quick change in the mood at the arrival of the bear. Okay, so here we can see that they have retrieved that part of the text, but we haven't used the evidence to say what we think. We haven't used those clues in order to infer. And in order to show the evidence, we need to use that word because. So if you can see here, I have Ivan cried out joyfully, then gaped with horror. Bears kill people and bears can climb. Okay, so we can pick out the clues that he's on about bears kill people and bears can climb. So we need to draw a conclusion that isn't actually said there. So Ivan's mood changed because he realised that bears kill people, that bears can climb. So he thought that the bear would be able to climb the tree and get him. Okay, so his mood moved from being joyful because the wolves had gone to actually realizing that he was in danger himself. Okay, we will continue to do some more work on inference during one of our sessions going forward. Okay, so let's think about today's session. So these are our Masters magnifiers. Having a quick rewind to them. Okay, the 2 that are missing at the top, let's have a look at them. We're going to start with the first one. I'm going to show you a slight part of the magnifier. Can you remember which one that one is? Okay, so that is our inference illuminator. Okay, it is our green one. Oh, we lost them both at the same time. The other one was our purple one, was our retrieval finder. Okay, and this one at the bottom that luckily didn't disappear at the same time is our blue one, and our blue one is our predictor. Fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at our what, how and why for today. So our what is to use the word selector magnifier to explore the meaning of words in the text. Okay, how is reading and research together, and why, so that we can show our understanding of why Robert Swindle, so Robert Swindle is the author of our book, has used the words he has in the Ice Palace. Okay, so to start this session, I've got a little question for you. Word selector, what can you remember about word selector? Okay, so hopefully you've remembered that it is our red magnifier. And the word selector, it says, can you explain the meaning of the words in context or why the author has used a particular word or phrase? Okay, so this has 2 parts really. So it's the meaning of the word, so what does the word mean, and why it is used. So our little saying for this is, what does the word mean and why is it used? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you some of the Ice Palace. And whilst we're reading it, I would like you to have a think about the words in there that you're not quite sure of, okay? And we can use the magnifier, the word selector, in order to address those after. So we're going to read from page 33 to 59. If you get your book. He jerked his head round and saw a white shape that flew soundlessly between the trees. As he watched, it settled on a branch, stared at him with great yellow eyes. "Go away, Snowy Owl," he whispered. "Go away and find a mouse to eat. I am no use to you. I am no use to anyone." The owl leapt from its perch with a scream, circled his head on velvet wings, and made off through the forest. After a moment, it came back and flew around his head again. "Perhaps," thought Ivan, "it wants me to follow it." He was becoming very weary, but when the great white bird flew around again, he followed. In a few moments, he saw the snowdrift in which he had made his shelter. He fell to his knees by the entrance and crawled inside with the last of his strength. The Snowy Owl circled the snowdrift once and was gone. When dawn came, Ivan wrapped himself up in his warm clothing and set out again. There was only a little bread in his pocket, and he knew he must save it, for he still had far to go. The wind was strong and the snow was deep, and Ivan went very slowly, with his head down. All at once he felt the snow shift, and he cried out. Beneath his feet a great crack opened up, and lumps of snow as big as houses fell into it with a hissing roar. He flung himself forward, trying to reach the other side. His mittens grabbed at the lip of the crack, but it crumbled and he was falling. Desperately, he clutched at a tiny fir tree that grew outwards from the side of the crack. It was so small that he knew it would never hold him. His weight would pull it out by the root, and he would fall down with the tumbling snow blocks to be buried forever at the bottom of the crack. But the little fir tree held. It jerked him to a stop and held, and he dangled by one arm over the drop as an avalanche of snow hurtled roaring into the chasm. Afterwards, he could not tell how long he hung there. He only knew that at last the avalanche stopped, and he scrambled his way somehow out of that ghastly crack. For a long time, he lay in the snow, sobbing with fright at the horrible fate he had escaped. Then, wearily, he got to his feet and brushed the snow from his clothes with his mittened hand. His heart was heavy, and if it had not been for the crack that now blocked the way, he might have given up and returned to his distant home. As it was, he sighed, turned his face onto the north wind, and went on. Presently it began to grow dark. "I must find another snowdrift," said Ivan to himself. He sighed. Long ago, when his father had taught him how to make a snow den, it had been fun. Now it just seemed like hard work. Snow dens are quite warm, he thought, but they are not like my little bed at home. The sky was a deep grey, turning black. When Ivan found his snowdrift, he fell to his knees and began to scrape out the tunnel with his mittened hands. After a moment, he stopped. His head tilted to one side. From far away, carried on the wind, he thought he heard music. He listened. The pine trees creaked and sighed, and snow powder hissed over the frosty crust. Then he heard it again. It was the sound of a fiddle. Ivan screwed up his eyes and shook his head fiercely. No, it was not real. It could not be real. It was another cruel trick to hurt him, to keep him from doing what he must do. He began once more to scrape at the snow, whistling a little between his teeth to blow out the sound of the fiddle. But when he stopped, there it was, rising and falling in the wind. He got to his feet and gazed towards the sound, biting his lip. There was a faint glow in the sky beyond the pines, and now he was sure there were voices too, mixed in with the fiddle. He looked down at the unfinished den, then out again towards the glow. It seemed real, all of it. The fiddle, the voices, and the glow. He saw a picture in his mind of people, happy people who laughed and shouted and danced to a fiddle, and then suddenly he was overcome with loneliness. He left the snowdrift and began hurrying through the trees, his eyes fixed on the warm, hypnotic glow. He came out of the trees onto a long slope, and there below him lay a village. Lamplight glowed warmly in all of its windows and spilled out of open doorways onto the crowded street. Everyone in the village seemed to be out of doors, and when Ivan looked at the street, he could see why. At the far end of it, someone had built an enormous fire. Its flames rose high in the air, and the snow all around it was pink with its glow. And the music, it wafted in great clouds up the slope, and Ivan had never heard such music. He was weary, but he wanted to dance. He was far from his home, yet he felt like shouting. And up towards him, their laughter spangling the night, came children, a long ribbon of children, hand in hand, running up the hill. When they drew near, they stopped, and their leader smiled, holding out his hand to Ivan. "Come," he said, "tonight is a feast, and you are welcome here." And though it was winter, and though it was night, and though the night was cold, these children had on summer clothes, and all the girls wore flowers in their hair. In the village below, the fiddles began a fresh tune. The line of children stirred restlessly, like a string of spirited ponies. The boy beckoned his smile invitingly. "Come," he said once more, "my friends would dance." And stepping forward, Ivan slipped off the mitten and gave his hand. At once, they went whirling away, across the slopes and down to where the people danced through the pools of lamplight on the snow. Ivan, skipping, threw back his head and laughed. The line had reversed itself, so that now the last child had become the first, and it was leading them onto the street. Once in the village, they did not keep to the streets. They began threading themselves like a many-coloured serpent to and fro between the houses. Once their leader took them through the doorway of the house, and Ivan had a glimpse of tables, chairs, and a big tiled stove before he was whirled out again into the night. People were everywhere, but if anyone noticed the stranger in their midst, no one seemed to mind. The music grew louder, and coming round the corner of a house, Ivan saw that they were close to the great fire. In the flames was an ox roasting, and nearby, on upturned barrels, sat the fiddlers. Their bows flashed back and forth across the strings of their fiddles, and they tapped their feet in time upon the beaten snow. The line of children circled, forming a ring with the fiddlers in the middle. Round and round they whirled, the firelight dancing in their eyes. Then the circle broke, and the child who had led them was thrust into the centre among the fiddlers, and the tune changed, and she danced with a special dance for them while they went around and round. When her dance was finished, the girl rejoined the circle and next was pushed forward, and the tune changed again. Ivan watched through tears of joy. The cold was gone, and the loneliness. What would be the tune when his turn came? And what steps would he dance? Round and round and round, the people of the village had stopped their dancing now, and were watching forward, and were crowding forward to watch the children. And as they watched, they clapped their hands to the fast, clever rhythm. The boy beside Ivan grinned, winked at him, and leapt into the centre. The child whose dance was done took Ivan's hand. The circle never stopped spinning. "My dance next," cried Ivan. "A few more moments and I will show you dancing." They whirled on. Ivan gasped as the volley of wind whipped out his legs, unimaginably cold. It scooped up in a twist of crystals and spun them about his body. And in an instant he was blinded as the stinging powder lashed his eyes. He tore his hands from those of his friends, and he fell to the ground, clawing at his face. The crystals turned to water, and he blinked them from his eyes. He had broken the circle. He must get up and take his place, or the dance would be spoiled. Already the fiddlers had stopped playing. He scrambled to his knees and cried out in pain and disbelief. The fire was gone. There was no ring of children, nor any mark on the snow where they had been. There were no villagers. The houses lay cold and broken along the empty streets. Snow sifted through sagging doors, and the wind moaned in sightless windows, stirring here and there a rag of ancient curtain. He knelt there in the snow and wept for the pretty phantoms of the dance, his tears becoming ice upon his cheek. And when at last the crying stopped, so that he could see again, he saw before him a great black hole in the place where the fiddlers had been, a well, a deep, deep well, with smooth sides and black, icy water far down at the bottom of it. And he knew that if his turn had come to dance, then the black water would have closed forever over his head. He got to his feet, shuddering, backing away from the well. Was it possible? They had been so beautiful. They had befriended him and made him one of them. Would they have led him to the brink of the well? Would they have let him fall? He stood there, forlorn, in the broken village. The wind blew around him, and there was laughter in it, and he knew. He turned and ran along the silent street that had no footprints on it but his own, past the last house and out onto the moon-washed slope. His feet sank into the snow, and his lungs were bursting. He did not stop until he had topped the slope and plunged deep among the black pines. There he found a snowdrift, buried into it, and cried softly till sleep came. He set out next morning, weary and sad. He even felt more lonely than before. It seemed to him that he had no friends in the world. There were only enemies out there in this wilderness. His bread was almost gone. There was one piece left, but he dared not eat it, for he did not know how much further he had to go. He had not walked far when turning back to look back. He saw something moving, far away, between the snow-laden trees. At first, it looked like a whirl of snow crystals whipped up by the wind. But as it came closer, he saw that it was an old woman in a grey, sparkling shawl which flapped about her as she came. He waited. The old woman came slowly, bending now and then to pick something up from the snow. When she came near, she straightened up, gazing at Ivan. Strands of her hair whipped across her face like sleep, but she was smiling. Ivan took off his mittens, put his hands in his pocket, and pulled out a crust of bread. He held it out to her. "Old woman," he said, "it is cold, and you must be very far from your home. Share my bread. It will warm you a little, perhaps." The old woman shook her head. "You are kind," she said gently, "but I do not need your bread." Ivan did not understand. "Old woman," he said, "what did you do when it was night and the wind howled like a hungry wolf?" The old woman smiled. "You are a good boy to care about an old woman like me, but I am not an old woman always. Sometimes I am an icicle, or a bear, or a spruce tree. Sometimes I am a twist of wind-blown snow, colder than the night." Her eyes twinkled at him. "One night," she said, "I was a snowy owl." Ivan stared, remembering how he had been lost and freezing in the night. "Were you?" he said. "The owl who showed me the way? And the bear who drove off the wolves? And the little fir tree in the crack?" The old woman smiled. "It may well be so," she said, "for lovers find small miracles, no matter what men say, and no one ever loved better than you love your brother." "How do you know of this?" cried Ivan. "And what did you pick up from the snow?" Okay, so I am going to leave that there. Okay, just have a think. Were there any words in that you weren't quite sure of? Okay, and that we can then look at with our word selector magnifier. Okay, hopefully from that. So our word selector, we know that it has two parts. It's the meaning of the words, and it also looks at why the word has been used. So our saying for our word selector is, what does the word mean and why is it used? Okay, so when I was reading that, I made a list of some words that I thought it might be quite nice to go over to help us make sense of what we were reading and is in the story. And that was snowdrift, avalanche, chasm, fiddle, bow, and mittens. Okay, and for that, I created one of our word workout sheets. Okay, so it's like this. We're going to have a look at that in a minute. So all of my words that I have chosen are all nouns. Okay, so we're going to look at the meaning of those words. Okay, which is one part of our word selector. So if I change my share and I go to this, hopefully you can see this sheet. So snowdrift. So snowdrift is a noun. A definition of a snowdrift is a hill of snow created by the wind. Okay, an example of that being used is the car could not pass the snowdrift. Okay, so we can see here in this picture that there is a hill of snow, a pile of snow that this car cannot get past. Okay, and it's created by the wind blowing all the snow around and leaving it in a pile. Okay, my next one was avalanche. So that is a large amount of ice, snow and rock falling quickly down the side of a mountain. So an avalanche is a large amount of snow, ice and rock that falls down the side of a mountain, and it happens quickly. So an example of that in a sentence is the avalanche caused chaos to the village below. Okay, so here on this picture here, you can see the ice and the snow and some rocks falling quickly down the side of a mountain. Okay, chasm. Definition of a chasm is a very deep, narrow opening in the rock, in the ice or the ground. Okay, so, oh, that should be they. They leaned over the rails and peered down the chasm. Okay, so they leaned over the rails and peered down the chasm. Okay, so here we can see a big crack in the ice here. Fiddle. A musical instrument with 4 strings played by a bow. So very similar to a violin, okay? So he played a tune on his fiddle, okay? I also put fiddler. And a fiddler is a person who plays the fiddle or the violin, okay? So that in a sentence, we need an experienced fiddler for the annual event, okay? And here is a picture of somebody playing either a fiddle or a violin. Okay, my next one was bow. So a bow is a long, thin piece of wood with hair from the tail of a horse stretched along it. It's used to play instruments that have strings. Okay, so that's what they use in order to play a fiddle or a violin. And it says you cannot play a fiddle without a bow, because obviously it's the bow going back and forth that makes the sound, the vibrations and the sound. And my next one was mittens. Okay, so mittens are a type of glove with a single part for all the fingers and a separate section for a thumb. Okay, so it doesn't have the individual ones for our fingers, just has one bit that covers all of the fingers and a separate part for our thumb. So his mittens were wet, so his hands were cold. Okay, so here we have the words, we have a definition, and we have those words used in a sentence, which hopefully helps you to understand it. Okay, if I go back to our original screen, I can move on to our task. Okay, so our activity today is to use the word selector, okay, to show that we understand certain words and we understand why they have been used in the Ice Palace. Okay, so our question number 1 is to draw a picture of a snowy owl circling the snowdrift. Okay, so here in our book it says the snowy owl circled the snowdrift once and was gone. Okay, so I would like you to draw. Number 2 is use the word mitten in another sentence. Number 3 is why do they use the word chasm and not hole? And number 4, why does Robert Swindle use the word avalanche in this sentence? He dangled by one arm over the top as an avalanche of snow hurtled towards him. Okay, so they are our questions. As always, we are going to use our steps to solve the question. So we have number 1, read it. Number 2, zap it. Number 3, scan it. And number 4, crack it. Okay, so let's have a look at our first question. So draw a picture of the snowy owl circling snowdrift. Okay, so that is our question. That we've read the question. We're now going to zap it, okay, to find those keywords. So I know that in that question, the keywords are draw, picture. Okay, so I'm not writing a sentence. I am going to draw a picture of the snowy owl circling the snowdrift. Okay. My third one, so I've underlined those keywords. So my third one is scan it. So this time I'm not necessarily going to scan this text, but I am going to use our sheet, this one here from our word workout, to look at the definition to show that we understand what snowdrift is in order to be able to draw a picture of our owl over the top of our hill, our pile of snow. And then I would draw that as my cracking it. Okay. So those are our questions. It is now time for you to use it. So you are going to use the word workout sheet. You are going to follow those steps for our Masters magnifiers, and you are going to answer for those 4 questions. Okay. And if you can share those on Class Dojo portfolio once you've done it, that would be fantastic. Okay, I look forward to seeing your drawings, your sentences, and your answers to all of these. Okay, see you soon, Year 3. Bye.